Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jordan Rutter, Director of Communications at American Bird Conservancy, and your host today. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you afterward. We'll be putting links in the chat, but in case you missed them, please know that we'll be sending an email to everyone who registered, and it'll contain all of that great information referenced today, as well as a link to the recording. Automated captions are available for this webinar, and you can turn them on by clicking on the CC icon. Please submit any questions you have during the presentations using the Q&A box so we can track those. Birds inspire and delight us. They fill us with wonder, and they do so much from pollination to pest control. But birds are in trouble. They're disappearing fast. Thanks to generous support from people like you, ABC works with diverse partners throughout the Western Hemisphere to prevent imminent bird extinctions, improve millions of acres of habitat with bird-friendly management practices, and advocate for and create innovative solutions to urgent threats that put birds at risk. And together, we're achieving results. Over the past 30 years, ABC has conserved over 3,000 bird species and more than 10 million acres of habitat for birds across the Americas. I know you're here today because you care about birds, and me too. They bring so much to our lives. By spending time noticing and appreciating the wonder of birds, we often find hope. And at ABC, that hope drives conservation action from our experts, partners, and from supporters like you, and yields results for birds in our backyard and beyond. And that's just what we're here to talk about today. Member support makes ABC's bird conservation results possible. And as we approach the holidays, there's a few different and exciting ways that you can make even more powerful results possible in 2026. If you aren't yet an ABC member, we'd love to welcome you with a special gift, and we'd love for you to pick which one. If you already are an ABC member, thank you so much, and welcome to the webinar. We want to share the wonder of birds with you, and maybe you want to share one with a loved one, and you can share an ABC gift membership with them this holiday season, again, with a gift of your choice. Will you choose a copy of the award-winning hardcover coffee table book, Bringing Back the Birds? It features over 200 stunning photos of birds from across the Americas. It has engaging essays from bird conservation experts, a foreword by Jonathan Franzen, an original poem by Margaret Atwood, and so much more. I genuinely can't tell you how incredible this book is. It's one you need in your library. Or maybe you will choose the new ABC hat. It's a beautiful dark green hummingbird baseball cap for you or a loved one to show your commitment to conserving birds and their habitats across the Americas. I literally wear this hat out birding and get so many compliments and comments about ABC, and it really stands out, and honestly, it fits so well. But all ABC members also receive 3 issues of our beautiful magazine, Bird Conservation. You also will get discounts including 30% off the Princeton Nature book catalog, 15% off at Birds and Beans Coffee, invitations to member-only events and webinars, and more. Members truly make it possible for ABC to conserve bird habitat, as well as help prevent extinctions, reverse population declines, reduce threats for birds, and build an inclusive and equitable future for bird conservation. Together, we can do even more to conserve wild birds and the habitats they need to thrive. Will you join ABC or give a gift membership now and make a difference for wild birds across the Americas? Visit abcbirds.org/giving or scan the code on the screen with your phone now. I really can't recommend this hat enough. It's so good. When it comes to birds, I was bit by the wonder bug at a very young age. Birds have been an integral part of my life for so long that I truly can't conceive a life without them. Because of that, I do get asked why birds pretty regularly, and to be honest, at this point, I think I take the why for granted just as regularly. Because birds are just who I am, from my job to my hobby to my home decor to the books I read, and even my dog's name. But this morning, as I was drinking my coffee and looking out my window, I saw a yellow-bellied sapsucker fly into my crabapple tree, and my face lit up. And you know those times where you can just feel the smile coming. And I called for my husband, who, lucky for me, is also a bird person in every way. And I wanted him to rush and join me in finding that unspoken joy in this backyard delight. And then we discussed one of my favorite bird facts. Did you know that woodpecker tongues actually wrap around their skulls like a yo-yo? And yesterday, a similar thing happened when a seasonally late chipping sparrow was spotted in my yard. And yet again this past weekend when a small group of purple finches decided to have a little party at our feeders. And that's just the past few days, birding right in my backyard. Every bird, a moment of wonder. I feel so fortunate for everything that birds have brought and continue to bring into my life every day. So, why birds? Because birds. Why not birds? Truly, I don't know how else to say it. Should I spout facts about how amazing birds are? Because I totally can. Can you believe that red knots will fly the equivalent distance to the moon over their lifetime? Or that a ruby-throated hummingbird can fly across the Gulf 500 miles of open water in about 24 hours? Or that a Canada jay can successfully hatch chicks in minus 20-degree Fahrenheit winter storms? Or, or, birds are amazing. And with over 10,000 species in the world, my life is going to be filled with wonder and joy and more, all thanks to birds. But an important part of my story is how I turned my bird wonder into action. See, I wanted to talk about birds and help birds and do something right now today. The birds can't wait. Let's go. Let's act on that wonder and do incredible things, being able to contribute to the conservation efforts and results being achieved each and every day. In large part, thanks to folks like you in the audience. That's a huge reason why I'm working at ABC right now. And you know the thing about birds? They're amazing on their own, but they're even better shared. And I am so lucky to share a deep love of birds with my colleagues joining us today. I can't wait for you to learn more about how these committed conservationists are turning their wonder into action right here at American Bird Conservancy. Are you ready? Let's meet our speakers and enjoy the wonder of birds together. First up, we have Garrett Rhyne, who is ABC's Southeast Motus coordinator, and he is an oncologist with a bachelor's from Virginia Tech and a master's from Louisiana State University. He has worked in a variety of field jobs from prescribed burning in North Carolina to banding owls in Idaho to tracking ant following birds in the Congo rainforest. With ABC, Garrett helps lead efforts to improve and expand the Motus wildlife tracking system across the southeastern U.S. with a focus on increasing receiver infrastructure in the Southern Appalachians. Lindsay Adrean, uh, she is ABC's Northwest Project Officer, and she works on marbled murrelets. She has over 15 years of experience in conservation management and research of coastal avian species. She holds a bachelor's in geography from James Madison University and a master's in wildlife science from Oregon State University, where her thesis work focused on Caspian tern predation of threatened salmon. She focuses on marbled murrelet space use and reproductive success along the Oregon coast. And as the Northwest Program Officer, she advances conservation on murrelets and other species in that region. Last but not least, we have Kaitlyn Parkins, who is our Glass Collisions Program Coordinator, and she's been working in wildlife conservation since 2008, holding research positions studying native plants, pollinators, migratory birds, and bats. And prior to joining ABC, Kaitlyn focused on mitigating threats to urban birds through research policy and outreach, and worked to help pass bird-friendly building and lights-out legislation while advising on bird-friendly retrofits. Kaitlyn holds a master's in biology and an advanced certificate in conservation biology from Fordham University. So first up, we're going to have Garrett share more about the wonder of migration and the phenomenon of Motus helping us understand it. Welcome, Garrett.
Hello. Let me share my screen with me.
Perfect. Take it away, Garrett.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to everyone about how the American Bird Conservancy has become a leader in the Motus wildlife tracking network, and how we use different technologies to track and uncover the wonders of migration of songbirds, and how we use that information to inform conservation. But to start off, I wanted to back up and say that when I began my career in avian ecology, it was mostly in the southern Appalachians of Virginia, where I spent my summers in the mountains conducting breeding bird surveys. And one of my favorite parts, and I'm sure parts of many listeners here, of those summer surveys was being able to find the colorful warblers, tanagers, vireos, thrushes, flycatchers, many of our migrant birds, birds that only spend a period of time, primarily the breeding season, in the United States, and then they disappear for the winter as they move back to Central and South America or the Caribbean. And what I loved most about this is particularly the fact that, one, we're getting to observe species that are traveling hundreds, if not thousands, of miles for their migration, but also the fact that as much as we like to consider the birds ours, we're getting to share our breeding birds with so many other places, and it connects places like the Appalachians with the tropics, like Central and South America. And oftentimes these birds are spending time in places that eerily look similar to the Appalachian Mountains that I did surveys in. So I love this idea of being able to connect faraway places through a bird. And what I wanted to do was take this fascination, this wonder, and turn it into action, just like what we're talking about today. And so I began my research in migration ecology, the study of migration, with my master's research at Louisiana State University, where I studied the migration of Swainson's warblers. These are very secretive forest-dwelling species that breed in the southeastern United States. And for my master's, I got to use these small devices called geolocators to help track the migration routes and wintering grounds of this very understudied species. And what I found myself falling in love with even more was sort of the technology of how we were able to do this. It's been an incredible past 10 to 20 years for wildlife tracking to be able to put very small devices on animals and know where they're going. And you might be asking yourself, why is it so important that we track an individual animal? We know generally species are here in the summer, they're down there in the winter. Is that not good enough? But it's really, really important for us to track individual birds using this sort of technology because it answers questions that we otherwise wouldn't know. We need to know, where do different populations go during the different seasons. We want to know the migratory paths that they take. We want to know, where are they stopping over. We want to know how long they're stopping over. When do they depart? When do they arrive? All of these are really, really important questions that directly inform conservation because we can't protect birds where if we don't know where they are and when they're at those places. So it's critically important that we gather this data, and it's been critically important that over time we've had better and better technology to help answer these questions. So how do we actually track birds? Well, if I'm a red-tailed hawk, a pretty big bird, I can hold a pretty sizable GPS satellite tag. And just like the devices on your phones, these tags can provide satellite GPS pinpoints with really high accuracy very continuously, and those tags can live a very long life. And this was a huge breakthrough in the past 20 years of just being able to do this for things like migrating red-tailed hawks. But what about the small birds? Many of our species that we're interested in, especially a lot of our declining neotropical migratory species like warblers and sparrows, they can't hold a tag that is that big. Instead, we have to use tags that are sometimes less than a gram or a gram and a half, which is extremely tiny. And not only does it need to be lightweight enough for them to be able to carry, we also need to be able to have affordable devices so that we can deploy a lot of them and answer questions at a much larger scale than we could if we were just tracking one or two birds. And that's where the Motus wildlife tracking system comes into play. Motus, which is not an acronym for anything, it is the Latin word for movement, was a program started by Birds Canada about 10 years ago. And what it did was take a tried and true method of radio telemetry, a technology wildlife biologists have been using since the 1970s, but they miniaturized it and they turned it on its head so that it could be used globally across a single network. So how does that exactly work? Well, think of Motus as two major components. The first component is the tag side. Once we safely capture the bird that we're interested in studying, we'll fix them with one of these small radio tags, either with some sort of leg loop harness or a glue that will fall off eventually. But we fit them with these radio tags, and these tags send out a unique signal that's essentially like a barcode that says, I am this individual of this species. So it's constantly sending out that signal. The second part of the Motus network is that we have to build a big network of receiver stations that are essentially these towers with antenna. And those antenna are constantly listening for those tags that are sending out the signal. And those antennas can listen for up to 10 to 15 miles with whichever direction they're facing. So, as a tagged bird or also bat or insect, because this is used not just for birds, as one of these tagged animals is flying and starting to migrate throughout the area, as it comes within range of one of these receiver stations, it is picked up, it is deciphered, and sent to a centralized database. And when you start to hit one station after the next, you can put together a pretty awesome migratory track, and we know where exactly they went. So, for example, these two maps show great examples of what Motus data sort of looks like. On the left, we can see the tracks of an American kestrel, and since they can have a bigger tag, you can see multiple years of the bird going up and down the Atlantic coast, with each of those green dots that you see that are highlighted being one of the receiver stations that it was detected at all across the way. And on the right side, we can see the track of a Swainson's thrush that was tagged in Vancouver, flew across the Great Plains down to the southeastern United States, and eventually ended up in Costa Rica and Panama. I can't overstate just how important this was and just how revolutionary this was, especially in the time that it came out. Because previously, we were not able to track birds of this size at this at scale. And so this is the sort of data that conservationists can rely on to implement important plans and preserve a lot of these species. And the way Motus really works is through collaboration. Motus is a collaboration of researchers, university institutions, state and federal agencies, NGOs, all coming together to work within the same network, but answer a bunch of different questions. So currently, there are hundreds of different projects going on of hundreds of different species. Everyone's got different questions, but we're all working together to maintain this network of receiver stations, which you can see here on the map. Each of those dots, even though they're different colors, each of those dots is a receiver station or an old receiver station throughout the US and down into Central and South America and the Caribbean, because it takes a lot of effort and money and time to be able to install one of these stations, but also to maintain it to make sure it's working well and collecting correct data. And that is sort of why it's so pinned on this collaborative nature. So, what is ABC's role in all this? Well, although Motus was started by Birds Canada and they maintain a lot of the data, it was ABC and specifically Adam Smith, who was the US director to the right of me in that picture, who would lead the charge and make ABC sort of the home for the American Motus team. And so now we have regional coordinators like myself. I cover the southeastern United States. Todd Allger to the left of me there in that picture, who covers the Northeast and the Caribbean, and William Blake, who is the Pacific Northwest coordinator. And then we work with partners such as organizations like the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, who help fill in areas that we don't cover, such as the Great Plains. So what is it that we actually do? Well, a little bit of everything. The first thing is that we provide regional coordination. We get to bring everyone in to the same room, those state and federal agencies, those institutions. We bring all the researchers together to make sure we're all working towards the same common goals and that we're maintaining the network. But we ourselves actually install and maintain many of these stations. I am on the road quite a bit for my position, Texas and Florida, to install these stations. I'm constantly climbing towers and putting them up. And we're also giving workshops and technical trainings to other professionals. We work directly with a lot of the manufacturers who make both the tags and the receivers so that we can advance the technologies that we're using. So we get to be on the front leading edge of a lot of these developments. And then we ourselves get to come up with and carry out research projects of our own. We're interested in many different species for tracking, and we have the resources to be able to do that. And just to show you how much impact we've had and how much work we've put in towards the Motus network at this point, since 2024, since we've had this full four-person Motus team, we've installed 91 new stations across the Americas, which you can see here in the map with those bigger green circles compared to the smaller yellow ones that are the rest of the network. And we've upgraded or repaired or revived another 49 stations all across the network. And just from the new stations that we have installed, we have detected over 1,500 different tagged animals of over 100 species. And that includes both bats and monarch butterflies as well. And so, what my favorite part about being this research support staff really is that we're working with, like I mentioned, hundreds of different researchers across hundreds of different projects. So, we're not just seeing data from one species or two, but we're helping collect critical data for a bunch of different species. Some species, like this eastern whippoorwill, all of these purple tracks that you see going across the map were birds that were picked up at our stations that we installed. And we picked up, I think, a little over 40 eastern whippoorwills that have been tagged across the eastern US. This is a rapidly declining species that uses eastern hardwood forests and is typically a favorite of people's to listen for in the summer months singing at night. Another example would be this project, which tagged semi-palmated sandpipers, another declining species of shorebird that were tagged in South Carolina. And because of Motus data and the network that we've built out, we were able to see that these birds, as they were moving north in the spring, saw a clear split of western breeding birds that went west into the Great Plains and eastern breeding birds that kept following the Atlantic coast up into Canada. We've been critical in part of a large-scale wood thrush tagging project, an excellent bird with a wonderful song. That is a project spearheaded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that has deployed over 1,000 tags on wood thrush across multiple countries. And our stations alone have picked up 700 of them, all of which you can see these tracks. Hence why it's so dense and messy, because we've picked up just so many birds. And we're going to turn that into really useful data for conservationists. Another example would be to go out to the Pacific Northwest, where some of Williams' stations out along the coast have helped track Dunlin, another declining shorebird species of conservation concern. And finally, one last example, one that I really enjoy, is bignose thrush, which are a very secretive species and rare species that breed up in Vermont and Maine and Canada. And our Motus network, especially here in the Southeast, has helped sort of uncover this really unique migration pattern where, as they leave their wintering sites in the Dominican Republic, they follow the Atlantic coast up until about the Carolinas, then they cut across, and in the fall migration, they come back down and then jump off from the tip of North Carolina and find themselves back in the Dominican Republic. So like I mentioned, not only are we supporting many other people's projects, but we get to be hands-on in the field helping tag and supporting tagging projects of our own. We were part of this larger wood thrush tagging project. We've been involved with northern saw-whet owls, Lewis's woodpeckers out west. We have plans in the coming years to study chimney swifts and salt marsh sparrows, and just sort of as a full circle of this part of the story here, grounds, one of my old field sites, and tagged Swainson's warblers yet again, except with Motus tags at some of my old field sites. And not only did I get to tag my old research species, but I got to see in real time as I followed on motus.org, the birds migrate in the fall and be picked up on towers that I built myself in the southeast as they made their way back to Cuba. And I love this because it reminds me just how much of that original story that inspired me to do what I do now, which is that connection between places through birds. And so with that, I just wanted to say that the Motus team is just now getting started. We have a lot of things in the future. If you're interested in supporting our work, I encourage you to donate as part of this fall fundraiser. And I also encourage you to explore data. So this is all public data. Anyone can see it. If you go to motus.org, you can explore different stations, different research projects, and the tracks of these birds. And this is sort of the underlying theme for how we're going to inform conservation in the future.
Absolutely incredible, Garrett. I mean, talk about wonder, both in terms of an appreciation, but also tell me more. I'm now wondering about all of this data that you're sharing and everything else. I can't wait to have you back at the end for our Q&A and to follow up with you to keep learning about your work. But thank you so much again, Garrett. That was fantastic. We're going to switch
Thank you.
gears a little bit and have Lindsay share more about marbled murrelets. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, Jordan. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. How's that looking?
Loading. It looks great. Take it away.
Great. Okay, yeah, hi everybody. I'm Lindsay Adrean. I'm the Northwest Program Officer for ABC, and I'm based out here in Oregon. So today I wanted to share with you a little bit about the wonder of our forests. And this picture on my opening slide is my local wondrous forest. This is the Coast Range of Oregon, and you can see the Pacific Ocean there in the background. So, our forests provide so many benefits, and we often don't recognize all of these different values. Our forests are sources of clean drinking water for us, and they support biodiversity, which is needed to keep the whole system functioning properly. We have numerous recreational opportunities. This is a picture of one of my technicians from last summer standing in front of one of our massive spruce trees that we have in our old growth forest. And then forests also provide jobs and forest products that we use every day. In addition to all of those fun things, carbon storage is another important service that our forests provide, with our mature forests being responsible for the most carbon storage, which is what regulates our atmosphere. So just in short, forests are amazing and they provide for people, for wildlife, and for the habitat. So, unfortunately, we've lost some of these benefits as we've altered our forest landscapes over the years. These two maps that you see here show the loss of virgin forest from the 1600s to the early 1900s. You can see there's a lot less of that black shading in the map on the right-hand side. Along the West Coast, where I am, Washington, Oregon, and California have all lost over 80% of the old growth forest that they once had. I think I've got yeah, so you can see how different the shading looks on those two maps. And then this map here shows you it's more recent. This is from about 2000 and shows you that we have made some gains with restoration, but we do still have a long way to go. Okay. Um, This map shows the forest types that we have in the US and what their level of threat is. So the warmer colors like yellow, orange, and red indicate more endangered forest habitats. And what really stands out to me here is that you see a lot of the eastern forests falling into those endangered categories. And this is why ABC focuses so much on habitat conservation as a method of conserving birds. And what I want to introduce you to are some of the conservation actions that we're using in forests of my Pacific Northwest region, but that can be applied by you today, no matter where you're located. So I promise I'll come back to forests, but first I want to introduce you to this seabird, the marbled murrelet. This species is distributed from Alaska down to Central California for breeding, and you may find them farther south, to the Mexican border during the winter. But it's actually loss of old growth forest habitat that was thought to be the initial cause of population decline. We cut down quite a lot of forest for timber harvest and for other development needs. So you're probably wondering, but what does this have to do with a seabird? Well, the marble murrelet spends most of its time in nearshore waters within about a mile of the shoreline. It exclusively eats fish and krill found in the ocean, and so it's classified as a seabird for this reason. However, it actually flies inland to nest in our old growth trees. And this bird needs trees that have very large, relatively flat lateral branches where they can lay their eggs. So you can see in this picture here, they don't actually build a nest. They lay the egg right on top of the branch. There's often moss or lichen or just general forest duff, fir needles and things like that. They lay the egg on top. Over time, while they're incubating, the weight of the body creates a depression, but they don't build anything. The structure has to already be there. So, in order to get lateral flat branches that are big enough so that this egg doesn't fall off, you need really old trees. Marble murrelet nest trees are usually at least 150 years old. And they use species like Douglas fir, Sitka spruce, and western hemlock in my area. Farther south, you'll find them in trees like redwoods in California. So this process is really time consuming for these birds. It takes about a month to incubate. And the adults, the male and the female, switch off incubation duties. One bird will sit on the egg for 24 hours while the other bird is out on the ocean feeding and resting. And then around dawn, they switch and the other bird comes in and the bird that was on the nest goes out to the ocean to feed. It's when I learned about this bird that I really started to understand how incredible our forests are, and I was just blown away by all the amazing things that are happening out there. So after that 4-week incubation, the chick hatches, and the adults they don't spend any time with the chick. Once it hatches, those adults beeline out to the ocean. The chick sits there by itself for 4 to 6 weeks as it grows, and the adults just fly back and forth feeding it fish, but they don't even sleep there at night. The chick is on its own. So what we're talking about is 2 to 2.5 months of vulnerability in the forest. These birds rely on the structure of the forest canopy, both to protect the egg and the chicks from the elements, but also to protect them from predators. So I have a cool video here. This is going to show you, kind of what a day in the life of a murrelet chick looks like. So that's the chick there, that brown fuzzy spotted ball, and it's begging for the fish from the adult. Like I said, the adult just delivers the fish and takes off, and then the chick can sit there and choke down that fish depending on how big it might be. And this chick you can see is gonna have to work at it for a little bit. If we have any ABC members on online today, take a look at the most recent ABC magazine because we have a feature on murrelets in there and it has a really nice nest photo. So you can see this chick is choking down that fish, and it needs protection in order to do that because the adults aren't there to protect it. Okay, so nest predation is a major cause of nest failure for this species, and it's possible that it's even the largest source of mortality to this species. We found that fragmentation of our forests makes murrelet nests even more vulnerable to these predators. These birds, it's particularly members of the corvid family, so ravens, crows, and jays, they're able to penetrate deeper into the forests when there is fragmentation present. And then they can also be attracted by other food sources like berry bushes that are often the first species to regenerate after a timber harvest has occurred. So you get more predators into an area, in a higher density, and then predation of other species goes up as well. Don't worry, this video is not scary, but I just want to show you quickly what a predator interaction can look like at a nest. So up against the trunk of the tree, you can, oh, there it is. The chick just woke up. That's the marbled murrelet chick. And this is a Steller's jay that I think has stumbled upon the nest. Looks like it's trying to figure out what's going on there. And that sleepy chick finally realizes that it has a visitor and it wakes up and luckily is big enough and fierce enough that it defends itself and is able to scare that Steller's jay away. This chick did grow to fledging age and did successfully fledge from the nest, but you can imagine that if this had been a smaller chick, the Steller's jay would have had no problem eating it, or if there had been an egg, the adults, when a predator like that comes to a nest, adults just fly away. And so if that had been an egg left on its own, it wouldn't have stood a chance. So this is where management plans like the Northwest Forest Plan are critical to the long-term viability of our old growth forests because it protects old growth forests and also serves as a restoration plan to replace some of the habitat that we've lost. And here at ABC, I work with our policy team to make sure that this plan stays intact. It was created in the 90s, but over the years, various administrations are always trying to chip away at it. And so if you want to help with this, you can follow the link that we're going to put in the chat. We actually have an action alert up right now to urge our legislators to vote against the Fix Our Forests Act. Although that name sounds really good, the Fix Our Forests Act is actually designed to weaken the harvest rules that are currently in place that help to maintain connectivity of our forests. And I just want to show you what that looks like. These photos show what is accomplished when we use thoughtful land management. So these are real photos that I took myself out the window of a plane when I was doing murrelet surveys here in Oregon. On the left is a portion of the Oregon Coast Range north of Newport. This is a landscape where we have a patchwork of private ownerships and no shared management strategy. But the photo on the right was taken over the Siuslaw National Forest, where that land is protected under the Northwest Forest Plan and timber harvest is well regulated. So you can probably guess, based on what I described earlier about fragmentation, which of these two areas we find more murrelet nests in, and in which area those murrelet nests are probably going to be more successful. So, yeah, this is why we do the work that we do, is to achieve results like this. So even as we're making gains in restoring habitat, we are also discovering some new threats to birds in these habitats. Not only are predators a problem in fragmented areas, but they can also be a problem in larger patches of habitat that have recreation areas. We're finding that these corvids are often attracted to food that's left behind by human visitors. So on this map here on the right, the darker green areas represent older forests where you might have murrelet habitat. And then those yellow dots are all recreation areas where people would go to visit our forests. And in this portion, this is the entire coast of Oregon. We have about 500 recreation sites where humans might be contributing to increased numbers of predators. So you can see in the photos I have here, we often find things like messy campsites where people have left food out and accessible. We sometimes have infrastructure like dumpsters or trash cans that aren't being managed closely enough and basically used properly to prevent wildlife from getting in that food. And then that photo on the top is a crow with a peanut in its bill. When these birds get a hold of human food, this is extra food that they don't need, and their populations tend to grow, and it throws things out of balance. And so then the natural predation that they undertake on species like the marble murrelet can increase, and then those other species don't have the ability to defend themselves from those increased risks. So we're working on addressing this through the Crumb Clean campaign. This was started in California about 10 years ago by the California State Parks, and we're now bringing it to Oregon and Washington because it has been shown to decrease the densities of ravens and jays in campgrounds and get them back to much more natural levels. This campaign basically just focuses on educating visitors about the problem and providing them with the tools that they need to manage their trash while they're out in natural areas. So anybody can do this. You basically paying attention to how you're managing your trash when you're out recreating in any habitat is great. Something that you might not think about is something that seems pretty innocuous, like an apple core. Many people wouldn't think twice about throwing that in the bushes when they're done with it. It's natural, it'll decompose, but in reality, that is extra food that is not natural in those habitats, and the wildlife don't need it, and it can have these unintended negative consequences. So, here are some of the new signs that we have that are going up in Oregon and Washington. I talked a lot about forests today, but responsible recreation is needed in all habitat types. We're finding that this same strategy of just getting people to do a better job of managing their own trash can be helpful for beach nesting birds as well. Corvids are a big source of predation at nests of the western snowy plover out here on the west coast, and the piping plover in the central part of the country and on the east coast. So really, no matter where you are, please be careful with your crumbs. It's really easy. And that's it for me. So get out there and enjoy. Thanks.
That chick was adorable,
They're
Lindsay.
great.
And like the fact that this seabird, one of the best swimming birds, nests in trees is just mind-boggling. Like, talk about wonder. But thank you so much, Lindsay. We're gonna come back to you in a few, but next up is Kaitlyn. Welcome, Kaitlyn.
Well, thanks so much, Jordan. So hey everyone, thank y'all so much for joining. My name is Kaitlyn, and I am obsessed with backyard birds, and I hope that some of you are too. Um, it can be so incredible to go out and travel and see birds in their most natural habitats that I think sometimes we take the birds in our backyards for granted. And I would love it if the chat is open, if y'all wouldn't mind sharing with me. Do you keep a yard list to keep track of the birds that come to your yard? And if so, what's your favorite bird that has showed up in your yard? Because for me, and I think for lots of folks, that's where some of the most magical bird moments can really happen, right outside of our windows, in our backyards, or off of our balconies. Whether it's, watching birds bathe while we have coffee or teaching our kids the name of the birds that show up at our feeders. And I know that I'm not alone. 1 in 3 US adults watch birds. That's 96 million people, and over 90% of them have said that they watch birds at home. And oh my gosh, someone has nesting screech owls in their yard, a 99 bird yard list. That's incredible. 175 species, painted bunting. Awesome. I love seeing this, and I love that so many other people are also on board with backyard birds like I am. Um, from common feeder birds, I grew up with nuthatches and chickadees and cardinals and juncos and hummingbirds battling over the feeders in our yards. And even small yards can attract incredible bird diversity. This is my colleague's yard list that he shared with me. So this is less than a quarter of an acre in Wisconsin in the middle of a medium-sized town. And he has 97 birds on his list, some more common birds, but also really incredible birds like lark bunting. If you're in the Great Lakes region, you know that's not a bird that should generally be showing up in that area, and he still has it in his yard. And I know that I get super excited whenever I see new birds in my backyard. I've been striving over the past couple of years since I moved into this home to make my own yard more bird friendly. And so the moments when a new species shows up, it never gets old. It's like winning the lottery. This is a blue grosbeak that was eating seeds in the sunflowers that kind of came with the house, and a western tanager that stopped over in an oak tree that's actually in my neighbor's yard but hangs over into our yard. And these birds keep me motivated and remind me how important these spaces can be. And like I said, I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. These are some glimpses into bird-friendly backyards that my colleagues at ABC have created, just a couple folks, and you can tell they all look really different, but these are all bird-friendly spaces. And when you put all these spaces together, mine and theirs and yours, you can start to see that backyards really matter so much for birds. Together, they form this huge connected habitat network that birds can depend on every single day. And so as our natural areas shrink and more development sort of spreads out from our urban areas, our yards and our patios and our balconies become important refuges. And this is where birds can find food and water and cover and safe places to rest. And small spaces collectively create this meaningful habitat because one yard is small, but millions of yards across America create this mosaic of habitat, and birds can migrate through it. They can stop over there, they can nest there, and it's important for their year-round survival. I'm going to talk a little bit today about how you can attract and protect birds in your own backyard. And you can follow just a few simple guidelines to create this safe haven. One, of course, is feeding. We love feeding birds. I love feeding birds. And I think one of the most important things we can do if we are feeding birds is to ensure that we're keeping our feeders clean. But beyond just feeding birds in our yard and offering them that buffet of food, we can also garden for birds. And then once we've attracted birds to our yards, we can reduce the threats there. So first, talk about gardening for birds. I am also a master gardener in my state, so this is like the intersection of my favorite things. This is my perennial garden in my yard. And by gardening for birds, you can attract so many more species than if you were just feeding birds. So planting native plants, provide different food sources seasonally. So insects support our breeding birds, while seeds and berries support migrating and wintering birds. So oak trees, for example, are one of the best taxonomic groups for birds in terms of supporting the insects that they need during the breeding season. And then as you get into fall and winter, seed heads and berries support those migrating and wintering birds. And you can look for things called keystone plants, which are plants that support a broad variety of taxonomic groups of insects that will support our birds. And it's one of the best ways to kind of get started with planting native plants in your yard, looking for those keystone plants. Nectar sources are important for, and insects are both important for hummingbirds. So I think, hummingbirds also rely on insects during the breeding season, but we have, feeders can provide nectar, and also native plants can provide nectar. This is a redbirds in a tree in my yard. This video was taken from my iPhone, so this bird did not care that I was standing right there gardening and was just enjoying itself nectaring on this plant. But I do also have feeders in my yard. There's a hummingbird feeder actually just to the left of this video off to the side in another garden. Um, and we can provide support for tons of hummingbirds. I've had up to like 6 or 7 hummingbirds in my yard at one time. Let's see here. Um, Adding structure and cover is a really great way to support birds. It provides hiding spaces and nesting habitat. Plant diversity is really key. If you have some shrubby areas, some brushy areas, some larger trees, some snags, if you can leave those, all of that additional structure and structural diversity provides a lot of habitat for various different species. Water is often a limiting resource for wildlife, especially in certain habitats, like in the desert Southwest. And so adding a bird bath where you have moving water to prevent mosquitoes and you keep it clean can be really helpful. For birds, I will say that it wasn't until I added a bird bath to my yard that I finally had a cedar waxwing, which is a species I've seen around town, but never in my own yard, show up. And then, of course, in the winter, if you can install a heated bird bath, the water, melted water during the winter can be really critical and attract a lot of birds. And this is actually, I took this picture specifically for this presentation this morning, and I kind of stood still for a few minutes and was able to catch this white crowned sparrow and dark-eyed junco at the heated bird bath that I recently put in. And you don't have to start huge, even small. So this is my backyard in May of 2024. I grew a lot of these plants from seed, and this is what my yard looked like this summer. And so even this small chunk of garden that I added a bunch of native perennials to, and I actually also removed a lot of my lawn and replaced it with mulch to reduce water use because I do live in a fairly arid place where that's really important to conserve water. So start small, add a couple of plants, and you'll be really surprised, I think, at what shows up in your yard. And once you've attracted birds to your yard, it's important. We want to make sure that we're protecting them. And ABC has several programs that help reduce threats to birds. And we'll be sharing some links. I can only briefly go through all of this, but there's tons more information on our website for each of these programs. So reducing pesticide use by hand, you can still hand pull weeds and use organic, non-synthetic methods of pesticide control. I am also a vegetable gardener, and one of the things I was most excited to find is that by planting native plants in my yard and increasing the insect diversity in my yard, I had so many good bugs that I actually did not have problems with any of the pests in my vegetable garden that I typically have. And so by inviting that diversity, you're caring for birds, you're caring for your ecosystem, and you're making it way easier to grow your vegetables as well. Keeping your cats indoors. Cats are the largest source of direct human-caused mortality in the US. And keeping cats inside is better for birds and the cats themselves. You can do things like take your cat for a walk with a backpack or a stroller. This is one of my colleagues' cats on a leash and a harness enjoying his backyard. Or do something like build a catio for safe outdoor time for your cats. And then finally, collisions. This is what I do at ABC. I'm the coordinator of the collisions program. Collisions kill over 1 billion birds a year in homes. Over 1 billion birds a year, and homes contribute nearly half of all of those collisions. Most window collisions at home happen due to reflection. So this is a front window. This window has blinds behind it. It has stained glass sun catchers inside of it, and it's still super reflective and dangerous for birds. The windows to the left and the right have insect screens on it, so that cuts the reflection and makes those windows much safer. But for the center window, I added temporary quote unquote dots to prevent collisions when I first moved in, because one of the first things that happened after I moved into this house was I had a house finch hit this window. And those temporary dots worked really well, and I was going to switch them out for a different deterrent, but I like the way they look. My view out is not really changed at all, so I left them up, and they've been up there for a couple of years now. Really for bird-friendly retrofits, the spacing is important. You want to put something on the exterior of your windows that's in 2x4 or 2x2 spacing. Imagine that 2x4 spacing is great for birds like chickadees, but if you have something small like a hummingbird here, you want to add more markings and make the spacing in between your patterns much smaller. Contrast is important. White dots are going to work best if you have vegetation reflected in your windows. Black dots best on sky. Lines should be 1/8 of an inch. Dots should be 1/4 of an inch. And of course, you want to put it on the outside of your windows. Single hawk decals, blinds, overhangs unfortunately don't work, nor does moving your bird feeders. There's no safe distance from a window for a bird feeder. Sorry, this is a picture of showing really reflective window with blinds. But there are tons of options that do work, and we have lots of resources. Things like tape on the exterior of windows, parachute cords hanging in front of windows. There are also films and vinyl dot patterns like Feather Friendly, which is shown here, and tons more options at different price points. And I have links, I believe, are being shared in the chat for all of these products and more. And finally, lights out. Artificial light at night affects almost every form of wildlife. It disrupts natural behavior. Birds are especially vulnerable, so reducing light at night is one of the easiest and most money-saving ways of helping birds. Make sure you're only using light where it's needed. Downshield your fixtures. Use motion sensors so lights only come on when you need them. Avoid lights that shine upwards, and for decorative lighting, because I know I'm about to put my Christmas lights up soon, put those on a timer so that they go off. After 10 or 11 o'clock at night, no one is probably coming down your street, and so they can be off. And then finally, you can scale it up. ABC coordinates the Bird City Network along with our partner Environment for the Americas. It's a great way to promote bird-friendly actions at the community level and also hold events to celebrate birds. For example, World Migratory Bird Day, a bird walk, tabling event. It's just a great way to promote birds and their conservation and these actions that everyone can take. And so I will leave you with this rose-breasted grosbeak that I was very excited to see show up at my mom's bird feeder. She has one of the camera feeders and an action list of just a couple of things that you can start to do, as soon as tomorrow to help birds in your backyard. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Kaitlyn. Talk about ending with how to actually turn that wonder into action. I just want to thank all of our speakers for your incredible presentations. If you can believe it, this is our last webinar of 2025. We can't wait for everything ahead in 2026, including probably more webinars with the speakers you heard today. So make sure to stay tuned and make sure to know that when you support ABC, the conservation efforts that you are learning about are only made possible thanks to ABC members and supporters like you who care about birds and bird conservation getting those results. Together, we can do even more to save wild birds and the habitats they need to thrive. Will you become an ABC member or give a gift membership to a loved one now to make a difference for wild birds across the Americas? When you do, you can pick your gift. Don't forget this incredible hat. I gotta put it on again because it's amazing, right? And then this book, a copy of the beautiful large format book, Bringing Back the Birds. Members also enjoy those 3 magazines, discounts for bird enthusiasts, and so much more. You'll help ABC reach our From Wonder to Action 1-to-1 match campaign goal of raising $2 million for bird conservation by December 31st. You can make your choice now. Again, gotta consider the hat here at abcbirds.org/giving by scanning the code on your screen with your phone or via the secure online donation form that you'll be redirected to after our webinar ends. Again, this is our last webinar of the year. 40,000 bird enthusiasts, including you, have joined us this year to learn about everything from cardinals to warblers to bobwhites to wonder. The great peril that facing Hawaiian forest birds right now, the powerful human connection to seabirds across millennia, how bold advocacy can turn the tide for birds in need, and so much more has been covered and will again in the new year with incredible progress, results, and more stories. I am so grateful for all of you making the time in your lives to join me in these webinars and learn more about birds and birds conservation. You really are making a difference, and I'm so grateful. Again, we'll be back in 2026 with another year's worth of bird webinars, and I can't wait for you to join me. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, and as always, good birding.